dear YouTubing friends, and welcome to this new video. Here I'm going to ask the question and try and answer the question: should you buy a flight Yoke system or Hotas? Remember, Hotas is hands-on throttle and stick system to use for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. When I released this video on my review of this flight Yoke system at the end of last year, I'll link you that in the top right, a number of people were asking and stating that they didn't know whether to buy a flight Yoke system or a Hotas system to use for the forthcoming Flight Simulator 2020. I've also seen questions on other videos of people not sure whether to buy a flight Yoke system or Hotas system. So in this video I'm going to try and answer those questions and give you my advice. Keep in mind, I'm not one of the lucky people to be in the Flight Simulator 2020 beta program. So I've not played Flight Simulator 2020 yet. I'm just going to give you my advice on my experience so far with flight simulators. And keep in mind also, I still use the Hotas and flight Yoke system for different kind of flight simulators. I use this in combat flight simulators like DCS World, for things like the F-18, F-15, the Spitfire. It's just made for those kind of simulators in mind, the Hotas systems. And obviously I use this for things like Flight Simulator X, so for aviation flight simulators, for aircraft with a yoke in. So I won't give my answer yet. You'll see down below that I segregated or divided this video into different segments, so jump to the part which is most appropriate for you. But without further ado, let's try and give you an answer to that question. So if, like me, you're looking to purchase the standard edition of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, the majority of the aircraft do indeed seem to be Yoke controlled aircraft. But there is one commercial airline aircraft within that edition, which is the Airbus A320, and that is indeed a stick and throttle controlled aircraft. It doesn't have a yoke. So if the Airbus is your cup of tea and you envision yourself flying that aircraft mainly in Flight Simulator 2020, then perhaps a Hotas system should be your consideration of what to buy. This is an entry-level Hotas system. It's a Hotas 4. I'll link you to my original review of this. As you can see, the stick and throttle divide on this system, so I can put the orientation of the stick and throttle as you would find it in the Airbus. So you've got the stick on the left side and the throttle on the right side. So perhaps something like this should be your consideration, like I mentioned, if you're mainly going to be flying the Airbus in Flight Simulator 2020. But on the other hand, like I mentioned previously, the vast majority of aircraft in Flight Simulator 2020 do indeed seem to be yoke and throttle controlled. So aircraft like the Cessna aircraft. So if you want to go and do a low flyover and a slow low flyover of cities, then you may be best getting a yoke system. Now, maybe a number of you are here for this question because you watched my review video on this flight Yoke system. If you've not seen it, click on that eye in the top right there and go and watch it. When I first got this yoke, the difference in, for example, Flight Simulator X when it came to controlling yoke controlled aircraft, yoke and throttle controlled aircraft, compared to using the Hotas system. It was like night and day. The difference was palpable between the two systems. It just felt and feels far more immersive when using the Yoke system. And because, like I've mentioned, the vast majority of aircraft within Flight Simulator 2020 seem to be using a yoke and throttle system, you will probably find it far more immersive using a yoke system. But maybe this is not for you, so I'm gonna take you now to my conclusion. So obviously the best answer will be to get both a Hotas and Flight Yoke system if you can. If you can't, and if you just want one of them, like I've mentioned before, if you're an Airbus lover, if you like using the Airbus only or mainly in Flight Simulator, so the forthcoming Flight Simulator 2020, if that's your thing, maybe look at getting some kind of Hotas system. If you want to do low, slow flying and you want to fly and enjoy the vast majority of aircraft and likely future aircraft which are likely to come in Flight Simulator 2020, things like the 737, 747, I know PMDG have now signed up to release a future aircraft on Flight Simulator 2020, then perhaps if you want the best immersion, go for the Yoke system. I'm going to give you my answer, no beating around the bush. The Yoke system is my preferable way of flying aviation flight simulators, and it's likely to be my preferable way of flying Flight Simulator 2020, or flying aircraft within Flight Simulator 2020. The difference is really palpable, like I've mentioned, from using a Hotas then transitioning to a yoke system. It just feels far more immersive in aviation flight simulators. But those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts? I'll be really interested to know them in the comments below. Please don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing for more. I'm going to be playing the heck out of Flight Simulator 2020 and giving you my thoughts on how this system works and perhaps how that system works within Flight Simulator 2020. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.